making comics or comics as an art form is really all about breaking events into separate images in sequence, right? And then the mind can recombine those into narratives. So he has a couple examples here, and also, that's the reason why we can look at this, and we all instinctively understand that that's not 5 different people sort of doing 5 different things, right? We all understand that that's a sequence. We all understand that there's movement between these panels, that this is one person sort of doing different things throughout this, right? And similarly, we all understand that this is not 3 different cats, right? We understand that this is the same cat going through the discovery of a nap here. And so according to MacLeod, and according to sort of comics theory in general, the reason why we're able to do that is because comics really depend on this idea of the gutter and of a closure between panels that takes place in the gutter, right? So this idea is really fundamental to a lot of comics theory, a lot of sort of comic scholarship, this idea that we as readers are really fully participant in creating this kind of meaning, right? So MacLeod has this kind of funny example where he's like, you're the murderer here, like you're the one like wielding the axe, I don't know, the blood is on your hands here, right? So you combine these 2 images in your head, and you understand, okay, like a grisly axe murder has been committed here, and so it's this movement between panels across what is often like the white space of the gutter, right? That's where the magic or whatever it is that he calls it here, right, lies. So it's this idea, right, that there's a large part of comics that is unseen, right? So we move between these images of things that we see, but there's a lot of it that is unseen, that is up to us to really just imagine, right? And that's sort of part of the power of comics, is that it allows us to imagine that. It allows us to fill in those gaps. So what the comic doesn't show is as important to the narrative as what is visible on the page, right? And this is something that is really central to all comics making, and to really sort of play around with that. Like, what are we showing here? What can we get away with not showing? How can we rely on the reader to fill in those gaps? So another aspect of that is that in comics, everything is visible on the page at once, right? So really, wherever you are in the reading of a comics page, you are in the present tense, right? Like, you are in that moment of reading. But visible all around you really is like the rest of time as delineated on that page, right? So the past is to the left of you, and the future is to the right. So this is also something that can really be a powerful tool and can really be manipulated for great effect, right? Like, that you can sort of create this like expectation of something about to happen, and you can show what has just happened, right? And if you compare that to prose, that's kind of impossible to replicate, right? So there's something about comics where you can really manipulate that. So sometimes you can do that at the end of a page. You can have a bit of a cliffhanger also, right? And then you don't have that effect. So you can really, you can really play around with that aspect of it, right? So here's another slide that just kind of shows that, right? You're in the present at all times, and the past kind of like recedes further and further behind you. So of course, it's really possible to do all kinds of things with this, right? And so if you think about whatever that Garfield strip I just showed you, that's a really simple example of that kind of thing. But of course, comics artists have really done all kinds of experimental work. And I'm just going to show you a few examples of just like how experimental the form can be, and just like how much opportunity there is for this kind of play, this kind of experimentation. So here's an old newspaper strip from a strip called Gasoline Alley, right? And you can see how the artist here is really playing around with this idea of the page layout as being sort of an entity in itself, at the same time that each panel is also a moment in time, right? So there's some sort of weird overlap. It doesn't quite like, it takes a little while to get your head around this, right? But the effect is kind of striking. And so you can do things like that, right? You can draw larger elements that cross panels, and that creates a sort of specific effect. You can also do things like this, right? Sort of have like one figure sort of like superimposed over other panels to sort of show some kind of I don't know, interaction with those panels in different ways. There's a waitress who's really overworked here. So that's another way that you can play around with that kind of tension and layout. And so here, probably some of you at least know this. So this is from a comic called Watchman. That was inspiration for a TV series a few years ago also. But you know, you open these pages and your eyes are drawn to the middle of it, right? So you read the middle before you even get to the beginning of that sequence. And so you can really play around with that kind of sort of placing a very like eye-catching element somewhere on the page, and then the reader has to sort of navigate their way back to the beginning and around this page, or this spread, I guess. As another example of sort of placing several different temporalities, right, in the same image, right. So that's something that comics can do also. It can show a lot of different time periods or temporalities, like in the same image, right. So that's another way to play around with that. And here's one that is particularly resonant for what we're doing at this workshop, right? So it's a comic by comics journalist Joe Sacco, who goes to sort of conflict areas in the world and creates journalistic reportage from there. So here's one he did from Tesnia a few years ago, when the war there was taking place. And so you can see also here there's like a sort of, you have like a larger image with like an insert of a smaller image and a person addressing the reader directly, right? So to a really, really powerful effect here. You see the background, you see the environment, and then you also get faced at the same time with this person who is sort of bearing witness to the situation, to her story. Another example of a really playful engagement with comics is this. So this is from a comic or longer graphic novel called Here, where the premise of the whole thing is that it's 300 pages or something like that of just drawings of a single place over time. And so he really sort of, every page will have like a large image that shows one moment in time, and then it'll have several inserts that shows other moments, right? So here the panels are sort of drawn from different years, and the effect is that these people like can kind of dance with each other through time, right? A quite lovely effect. A few examples just to really show you just like how, I mean, this, I'm not even really sure how to read this or how to make this make sense, but I just kind of love it because it's so wacky, right? And I'm not really sure, like, do you read this in sequence or do you read it as like, is this just like one little ball rolling along, or what is even really going on? It's kind of hard to get to grips with it. But I think the effect is striking, and it's a really cool use of time and space across this page. Just a few examples here from a cartoonist called Chris Ware, who does these sort of almost like exploded like diagrams of buildings sometimes, where he'll show everything in sort of like cross section of a building, show everything that's going on in that building at the same time, right? So again, really showing a lot of different times, a lot of different angles on different lives taking place at the same time. And he also does these kinds of things where he will sort of diagram the whole building and create these little sort of comics that show you what's going on in each of those rooms. And then finally, here's another page of his where he really just, I mean, how are you even reading this, right? Like, presumably you start in the top left corner, but then you make your way through this in some kind of way, and it's sort of up to you to figure that out, right? It becomes a little bit like a puzzle. And so, you know, we're not expecting you to create this kind of work today. Probably yours will look maybe a bit more like this, or something like that. But I just wanted to show you some examples of just like how powerful this medium can be in really sort of just showing things in a new way, right? Making us look at known situations in new ways. And so some of the choices, so if you read Making Comics, the other McLeod book, you'll have read the first chapter where he talks about the 5 choices that cartoonists make when making comics. And I think these are really important to keep in mind as you continue with the work for this workshop, right? So choice of movement, choice of frame, choice of image, choice of word, and choice of flow are sort of the main 5 things that you will be considering. And so probably the most important of these for this workshop is the choice of moment, right? So that's how you break down your narratives into a series of moments organized sequentially and juxtaposed next to each other in order to trigger the reader's imagination to perform closure across the gullet between the images, right? So really, the choice of moment. Which moments are you going to choose, and how are you going to put them next to each other to trigger this kind of closure, this kind of involvement by the reader? So that's the choice of moment, but of course also the choice of frame, image, word, and flow are important. And I just have a few examples from one of my favorite books that illustrate these principles. And so it's this book by cartoonist Matt Madden, where he basically draws the same one-page story in 99 different ways to show how you can really vary this. So here's the basic story. It's not very exciting, and that's kind of the point for Madden here. But this is one of 99 variations, and if we sort of change that up, then maybe we get something like this, or Madden gets something like this, right? So a completely different sort of perspective, a completely different imagination of the same basic story. And of course, he's sort of well, if he's doing 99, he's doing some really sort of wacky, out there ones too. So he's really just showing you like how different you can make these, even a basic story like this, right? You can really, by choosing different moments and choosing different words, different combinations of words and images, all this, you get really, really different effects. So maybe some of you also read, I sent you a short, sort of really close reading of this old comic called Master Race. And I think it's just such a, excellent example of just how much is going on in just about any comic, right? You can really go deep on these things, and there's just so much going on. So this comic is a really good example of a masterful use of page layout and breakdown into moments, right? And into thinking about which moments to show the framing of characters, the relative position, and also sort of the change of pacing to drive the narrative forward. These are just examples really for inspiration, right? And it's really up to you to figure out how to fill your pages. So I'll end with this. At the end of Making Comics, McLeod says that for each new reader, or for each new maker, artist, comics is always a blank page for each new hand that approaches, right? So making comics is a lot of work and also a lot of fun. And I hope I've given you just a few ideas about how to approach this task that most of you are probably not very familiar with, in order to be able to tell the stories that matter to you over the next few days. Well, thank you. Yeah. No.